ER model, entity relationship model example. So let's consider this very simple example, a part of the ER diagram for a given organization. For example, for this um, explanation, I'm taking a part of a construction company. So this is the description. A database is needed by a construction company to manage a part of its business. The management needs to store its employee information, office locations, employee dependents, clients information, supply information, materials provided by its suppliers. So they need to keep track of all this information in their database. So if you want to get a detailed information about each of these entities that are available inside the system, for example, employee information may include first name, last name, street, city, state, zip, project ID, and the project name, right? The supply information may include name of the supplier, street, city, state, and zip, category of materials they provide, and telephone, right? Remember that one supplier can supply multiple categories, right? Categories in the sense construction materials, maybe decorative materials, paints, all those categories. Client information include first name, last name, street, city, state, and zip, and then telephone. Material information include category, amount that they currently have, unit price, and then the reorder level, at which level we should place another order to the supplier. Okay, each material is linked with a particular supplier. So office location contain name of the location, street, city, state, and the zip. Employee information, each employee is assigned to a particular office location. An employee can be assigned to one office location only, right? These are the information that we currently have. So this is not a very complete system, but to make it simple, so we take only part of that business, right? So how are we going to create an ER diagram or ER model for this simple system description, right? So we kind of have a clear identification of each entities right now, because it is clearly given under these numbered list, right? So what we need to do is we need to create each of these entities separately. For example, so you need to create one entity called employee, because it's given here employee. We need to get the first name, we need to store last name, we need to store street, and so on, right? I already created all these entities so that you know how to do that. You have the employee entity. Now you have supplier information, so you get somewhere here supplier has all this information that is coming from this description. And office location, let's keep it very close to employee because we are going to connect these two somehow. And materials and suppliers are connected, so we'll keep them together somewhere here. And then the client, and also we have dependent are related to employee, so that I keep dependent somewhere here. So let's move all these further down here, and then somewhere here. Client may not be connected to anything based on this description, but anyway, first thing first, we have dependent first name, last name, and date of birth, right? So this is not the regular weak entity representation. It should be like this, dependent, right? So to include the all the attributes, I could do this, but the thing is that is different from whatever the convention I'm using here. So I thought of using this convention, but that may not be a proper representation. But anyway, so this represents my dependent entity. That is a weak entity. That's why I use double lines. Right, so let's connect employee with dependent. So you have a relationship here. Now you connect this one to this. One particular employee may have many dependent, 0 or more dependents, right? And then we may need to has dependents, right? Employee has dependents. One employee may have 0 or more dependent, but if you get one dependent, definitely you must have one employee, minimum one, and then the maximum also one, right? Without having an employee, you cannot have a dependent. Now, supplier and the material. Let's connect these two. Let's get a relationship. Provides materials, and one particular employee one particular supplier may supply many materials. So in this case, this is going to be many to many, and this is again one to many, one or many, right? So if you have a supplier, he may provide one or many kinds of materials, right? So to be a supplier, they must supply at least one kind of material. So that's why we have the minimum as one. If you get a particular material, there must be at least one supplier. Without suppliers, we cannot have materials in our system, right? So then the same material, for example, roofing, single sheets can be provided by many suppliers. So that's why it is one or more, right? And supplier provides material, and employee, and then let's connect office location to somewhere. Employee, let's get a relationship here. Let's move this one down so that we have enough space there. Let's works in. So here you have one particular employee, one employee can work for only one office location. He must have a office location, and one particular office location may have one or many employees, right? To be an office location, it must have at least one employee, right? There cannot be have any office locations without any employee, right? So there must be at least one or more employees for a given office location. And if you get a one particular employee, he must work for only one location, office location, right? If you take one employee, he must work for one office location. That's why the minimum and the maximum is one. Now, the client, there is no way that we can connect the client to this system. Let's take the project, and project ID and the project name is a part of this employee. When you read this information, so it comes under the employee entity, but if you want to connect a project with a client, you cannot do this way. In that case, what you have to do is we have to separate this out into two different entities, namely employee and then the project, right? So even though you do not do that, when you want to normalize this table, the project ID and the project name, there is a transitive dependency, so that you have to separate this one into two relations anyway. So why don't we do that one right now? So it's a good exercise for you, that you get project has project ID and name, right? So let's remove one element from there, and for this one we can remove these project IDs. Instead, we can create another relationship, works for the project. Let's connect this one and here. So if you get a particular employee, he may work for one particular project right now, and then in previous time he might work for something else, some other project. In that case, if you take one particular employee, he must be at least one project or many. And if you get one project, it has at least one or many employees there, right? So here you may have like a project ID, employee, and then in addition to this one you can add additional attribute here called start date, and also let's remove this and let's copy and end date. So this will make sure that one employee can work for many projects. Right, now client, project has client. Let's connect those two as well. Client of this project. Let's connect these two first and then decide what are the cardinalities. Let's consider, if you take one project, housing project for example, that housing project may have many clients. So for a one particular, if you have a project, currently that project may be under construction, so that you don't have clients, so you may have 0 or more clients for a given project. But if you get a one client, that client can buy one property from one project and another property in another project, so that it's going to be one or more. To be a client, you must buy something for us. So that has to be, if you take a client, there must be a project, at least one project, but they can buy many houses from us, from the construction company, so that it can be one or many. But if you have a project, that project may have clients right now, or maybe still that project is under construction, so there are no clients yet, so it is 0 or more. So now everything is connected, supplier, and then materials, also dependent, employee dependents are connected, employee and the office location is connected, and then the employee and the project is connected, project and the client is connected, right? Then we can connect this project with the supplier as well, right? For this project, we don't need that information anyway, right? Who is providing materials for this project? we don't need to keep track of that. If you ever want, you can do that as well, but that information is not that useful. That's why we do not need to keep that. Gets material, gets material from the supplier. Project gets material from suppliers, so that one supplier can provide to many projects, one or many projects. One project may get from one or many suppliers, and one supplier can provide to one or many projects. So this project gets material from this supplier, supplier provides these materials, right? So now all of them are connected, so try to keep them connected so that we can combine all these entities to get some useful information, right? So if you want to get the project alongside the suppliers related to that project, and then you still have that connection established, right? Otherwise there is no way of getting that particular information, right? If it is not connected, then we don't have any references to that particular supplier from the project or from anything else, right? So if it is disconnected, a separate island, there is no way that we can connect that information. So if we have an ER diagram, we try to get it as much as connected in a meaningful way, not unnecessarily, but in a meaningful way. Now this is what the ER diagram looks like if you want to create an ER diagram for this simple description, right? So this one is a weak entity, so let's make it a weak relationship, and also this one is going to be a total participation. So normally weak entities are connected with total participation, one or more. Each dependent must have one there, but it is already represented with this. But anyway, I'm just trying to make it as a double line so that we do not need to specify these numbers. If you use the crop out representation, that's also correct, because we are using 0 or more dependents. Because of this 1 and 1, this is total participation with the employee anyway. But in a regular ER model, if you are not using this notation, you can simply put weak entity and then the weak relationship, and then you can connect these two with a double line and then remove this arrow. So this is how you represent and then connect with this entity, right? So it's going to be like this. All right, so this is going to be an arrow because it is one. All right, one employee can have many dependent, right? But if you take one particular dependent, they have only one particular dependent has only one employee, right? So this is the way you normally represent, but because of the way that I used to represent, because this is less clutter, if you include all these attributes inside the box, so you can have a very clean ER diagram. So that I had to stick with this notation. But if it is a weekend relationship has dependents, then you can follow that. All right, so this is our final result. But depending on your assumptions, this may be slightly different, right? For example, we may have some materials we buy directly from some shops that the supplier may not supply that. In that case, this would change to this. zero or one material has zero or more suppliers, right? So depending on the assumption, uh, your cardinalities might be slightly different. So remember to include all these assumptions somewhere, so that anyone else who is looking at this diagram knows exactly what is happening in this setup. What are the primary keys of this diagram? Let's see, starting from the employee, let's see whether we have some unique attribute in this employee table. First name, last name, date of birth, seems like no. So what I want to do is I want to add a new field called empid. I'm adding a new attribute and underline that one to indicate that that is my primary key. And let's come to the dependent is slightly different. For some dependent, there is no primary key for that one. The primary key is made from the combination of the primary key of the identifying employee. There should be a discriminator here, so it can differentiate between the inside that employee, for example. So what I would do is I would draw a dotted underline. This is the best way to do something in this, that's why I just use that way. And copy this and then paste it here. So the first name and the last name is good to differentiate some member in that family. So right now we have a discriminator for the dependent, and later we combine the employee ID with that one to make the primary key. Supplier, seems like we don't have anything to the supplier as well. I will say supplier ID and underline that one to mark it as the primary key of that supplier. Category, material, not the category is not a field, so C category ID, cat ID, probably underline that one too. So similarly you provide project IDs there, so we can directly make it as the primary key. Client, so let's add one there, client ID, and office location. So let's do this location ID, for example, name is street address, that one has a primary key, and then everything else has a primary key as well. Okay, sweet. Now okay, so this is how you generate a ER model for a given system description, right? So remember couple of important points. Every single entities must be connected to the main diagram somehow, so that you have always there is a pathway from one entity to another one, so that you can connect all these entities to get a meaningful information. If you have separate islands, and then you may end up with very hard time connecting some information with this ER diagram, right? So try to keep it connected, and then try to keep all these cardinalities meaningful. And then if you ever want to divide any entity into two, don't be afraid, go ahead and do it. Some just like when the description given, so that project ID and the project name were inside employee information, but to model this one precisely, I had to change it to two different entities called employee and the project. Anyway, Even though you keep all this information inside the employee, at a later stage when we map this one into relational model, relational schema, we will definitely change that one into two different entities, right? At least when we do the normalization, that's going to be definitely two different entities, right? So hopefully you understood the concept of ER model.